Hello, I'm Andy, I guess, and I genuinely did not think that this would be my first YouTube video. Over the past year, I've been working on a video essay about my favorite Gravity Falls character that's really long and extensive and probably isn't going to come out for like another year. And I've been really excited to post that, but recently some crazy drama happened in the Muppet fandom, and as a self-proclaimed Muppet expert, I consider it my duty to discuss what happened and generally talk about the state of the Muppet franchise right now. If you know me from real life or from my social media accounts, you know that I absolutely adore the Muppets. I've spent years of my life watching everything Jim Henson and his company has ever made, learning as much as I could about the Puppeteers, and really deeply falling in love with everything about these characters. I cannot stress enough how much I love them and want them to thrive. With a brand new Muppet reboot on the horizon, a lot of people who probably haven't thought about the Muppets in years are revisiting the franchise and wondering,
why are there so many songs about rainbows?
why does Kermit sound like that? This discourse about Kermit's voice has been going on for a long time now, but recently has been brought back to the public's attention not only because of this reboot, but because of a recent public statement made by his former puppeteer. A statement that I do not think was super well thought out. So let's discuss. What actually happened to Kermit? In 1990, the creator of the Muppets, Jim Henson, died very suddenly. It was a horrific tragedy that came as a huge shock to everyone around him. If you want more information about what led to his passing and the history of the Muppets as a whole, please watch the Defunctland series on Jim Henson. It is by far the best documentary on the subject, in my opinion. People were worried that because he had died, the Muppets were essentially over. How could they continue to exist without their creator and the person who performed so many iconic characters? In particular, people were worried about Kermit the Frog, the first Muppet ever made and a character who many people considered to be an extension of Jim Henson himself. Luckily, the puppeteers working with the Jim Henson Company at that time were able to step in and keep his legacy alive. Most importantly to this video, the role of Kermit the Frog was taken over by Steve Whitmire, a young puppeteer who had been working with the Muppets since he was 18 years old. Before Jim's death, he had been best known for puppeteering characters like Rizzo the Rat, Wembley Fraggle, Bean Bunny, and many, many more iconic characters. I am forever grateful that Steve took on the task of not only performing Kermit, but so many other Muppet characters whose puppeteers either passed away or retired. He was able to keep the legacy of those characters alive and allow the audience to continue to see them thrive. But despite the puppeteers' best efforts, over the next few years, the quality of Muppet content would slowly decline due to constant changes in ownership. The different executives all had their own ideas of what the Muppets should be, often overriding the opinions of puppeteers who had strong understandings of who the characters were and how they should be portrayed. In 2004, Disney ended up purchasing the rights to the Muppet characters, and the content that has come out since then has been mixed. There's definitely a lot of bad stuff, but also quite a lot of good stuff too. And despite what some people would lead you to believe, none of the good or the bad has been a direct result of certain puppeteers performing certain characters. More on that later. In 2017, Steve Whitmire was fired by the Jim Henson Company from all of his puppeteering roles. It was really upsetting not only to the fans, but to literally everyone involved, on both sides. I was incredibly sad when I learned that Steve had been fired. He and Jim were the versions of Kermit that I had always grown up with, and I wasn't ready for that to change. I don't want to get into the reasons behind Steve's firing, mostly because the information that we have been given is very he said, she said, and I don't want to speculate on what parts of the story are true and what is exaggerated. The short answer is there were disagreements about how Kermit should be portrayed, and Steve allegedly became difficult to work with. My personal opinion is I don't think he should have been fired, but I'm also unaware of the whole story. I don't have enough concrete evidence to comment on what actually happened. Frankly, no one does. Both sides of the story seem to be very biased against the other side, and I don't think it's my place to say which side is right. That being said, I do truly wish Steve was still a part of the Muppets. He is insanely talented and brought a lot to his characters. When Kermit's puppeteer was replaced by veteran performer Matt Vogel, I was really shocked by the immediate hate I saw him start to receive. While his voice may not have been perfect, I thought he was a talented performer who brought a lot to Kermit's physicality, but it seemed no one else agreed with me. People were quick to call this Kermit an imposter and attack Matt for his vocal performance. Many people heavily criticized him for having never met Jim and therefore not understanding the nuances of the character. These criticisms were not helped when Muppets Now released in 2020, a show that was critically panned for the Muppets feeling one-note and boring. Personally, I blame that more on the pandemic and the fact that Muppets Now was never meant to be a TV show, but a series of goofy social media shorts. The writing of the Muppets is always worse in social media posts and short skits compared to actual TV shows and specials. So, while I do think that Disney has been taking away layers of nuance from the Muppets, I think that is an issue that did not start with Steve's dismissal and also is not always the rule. Recently, though, with the announcement of a new Muppet TV pilot coming out in February, Steve Whitmire has taken this as an opportunity to vent his frustrations with the modern Muppets, and the way he's gone about it, I think, is rather unprofessional and frustrating to see as a huge fan of his. So I would like to break down everything he has claimed in this statement. I will try to include as much of his statement as it was originally written in this video, but I will be cutting some parts of it out just for the sake of time. If you would like to read his full statement for yourself and come to your own conclusion, I will leave a link to that in the description of this video. Okay, so while I was editing this video, two things happened. First, Tough Pigs posted a response to Steve's statement, which was really well written and repeats a lot of the points that I make in this video, so I would definitely recommend reading it. There will be a link to that in the description. Second, Steve Whitmire reposted his statement and rewrote some parts of it. The thesis is pretty much exactly the same, but there are some differences in the way that he words things, and I don't think it would be fair of me to post this video without acknowledging that. In particular, I think it's important for me to share this one specific part of his updated statement. Please note that I am relaunching this post after a flawed technical attempt due to unforeseen issues with the website. If you and I have an in-person conversation, you're likely to interpret what I say differently than if you read something I have written. The interpretation of written opinions is left with the reader to add tone and attitude, despite the intentions of the author. I want to say that while the handful of you who saw it and commented the first time around seemed to resonate with the content by taking it in much the way that I intended, there were folks who clearly misinterpreted my intent as egotistical and mean. That sort of misinterpretation is bound to happen no matter what, but my hope is that deeper explanation can help, since, evidently, skimming the surface of the issue in a blog post rather than writing an entire book is insufficient to reach an understanding for many out there, so I am taking another stab and adding more detail to the post. After decades of study and 10 years outside the Muppets, my focus here is on the dissipation of Jim Henson's influence within what he brought into the world, just as it was my focus when I was on the inside. My intent is to inform, not offend, by being truthful in all that I convey. This is ultimately about you gaining further understanding of the difference between true evolution and mere alteration for fame and fortune. That said, I have been asked innumerable times for my opinion on the topic of the present state of the Muppets, as well as Kermit himself, because I lived on the inside of all this for years. What follows is for those critically thinking fans who care about why something is awry. If you are at a stage where you think we need the Muppets at any cost, this post is not for you, unless you seek to gain deeper understandings of what constitutes their integrity from someone who was their primary defender. I just wanted to clarify that when I'm discussing Steve's statement in this video, I will sometimes describe what he's saying as disrespectful or unfair. When I say those things, please understand that that does not reflect how I think Steve is in real life, or how he truly feels about the other Muppet performers, because I don't know him personally. I'm not trying to misconstrue Steve's message or portray him as the villain in this story. I am merely trying to give you a different perspective on the situation. I still stand by what I said in this video because it was my genuine reaction to his original statement, but I hope that you will all read his updated statement and come to your own conclusions. I will leave a link to both the original version and the newest version in the description of this video, but I'm not going to rewrite or re-record this video because I'm already done. Like, this literally came out as I finished the video, so I can't re-record it. I'm already good, so sorry, Steve. I'm making sure people read the updated version. Sorry. Before I fully get into it, I would like to make a few disclaimers. First, I am in no way trying to attack Steve Whitmire or claim that I know more about the inner workings of the Muppets than he does. I'm just a fan, giving his opinion on a topic that I'm very passionate about. I cannot stress enough how much I love Steve Whitmire. I think he's one of the most talented puppeteers alive, and I adore the work he's done with the Muppets. If you want to see some incredible puppetry, watch Wembley Fraggle in the original Fraggle Rock show. Not only is he just one of my favorite characters of all time from any TV show ever, but I think that the subtle emotions that Steve is able to convey with such a simple puppet are just absolutely mesmerizing.
I'm always here, I'm never there, I'm never ever anywhere excepting here, 'cause here is where I'm in.
I think that we can and should be allowed to critique the people that we admire. I would also like to add that I am a human and I may get some facts wrong. I will try to correct myself in the description or in the comment section if I say something that's off. It's also completely okay to disagree with me. My opinion should not be treated as gospel. And finally, do not harass any of the puppeteers I talk about, anyone who is working on this new Muppet Show special, or any other Muppet fans. That will truly get us nowhere. Think before you post and always try to be kind. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's get into Steve's statement.
I see literally thousands of comments and receive as many messages and emails from people like you. People who sense that Kermit the Frog as we know him no longer exists. In both cases, most are from casual viewers rather than from deeply devoted Muppet fans. The public at large is sensing that something has gone wrong. I am told that within the circle of Disney Muppet performers, all of these people are written off as being haters and are ignored. But the vast majority of the comments and messages I see aren't hateful. They are discerning. After a decade to adjust, what is before them obviously doesn't work, and ignoring the problem only increases it.
So, first of all, he claims that many Muppet fans have been very vocal that Kermit the Frog as they know him no longer exists. And this is true. Fans have been very vocally against Kermit since Steve was fired, but he says that most of the comments aren't hateful and just rightfully pointing out the issues that they've noticed. I feel the need to disagree here. While yes, many critiques of the way the modern Muppets are portrayed are constructive and valuable, the specific comments about Kermit are almost always about Matt Vogel's voice. These comments are only ever directed at Kermit and not Miss Piggy, or Fozzie, or Dr. Teeth, or any other character. Matt Vogel auditioned and was cast as Kermit. He earned this part for a reason. If you look past his voice, which is constantly improving by the way, his physical puppetry is incredibly strong and deserves praise. But none of those people ever bring that up. Most of the time, people just say his voice sounds dumb. They call him an imposter, make uneducated claims, that they could do a better job puppeteering Kermit, despite the fact that Matt Vogel is a professional puppeteer with the Jim Henson Company since 1996, and there's some random guy with a Reddit account.
You know, there's this thing called social media.
There is a thing called social media. I think I know where you're heading with this.
Yeah. So social media is great. It can be great.
Yeah.
It can also be really hurtful. I will tell you that my memory, back when they did the Muppets Celebrate Jim Henson, and seeing Kermit come through that door, and it very clearly was not Jim.
Right.
I can relate to that feeling. I can relate to that feeling that fans have now, seeing, the change, the transition from Steve to me. I can imagine that is a shock. And I don't begrudge anyone for feeling, Steve was their Kermit. That's okay, because Steve was their Kermit for 25 years. When I grew up, Jim was my Kermit.
That's right.
And then Steve was my Kermit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I believe in the characters. I believe in them. I don't begrudge anybody for feeling like, well, he doesn't. That's not Kermit. What does bother me is when I get tagged in things.
Matt Vogel's voice will never sound good enough for these people, so constantly bringing up how weird he sounds is not constructive. It is just hate.
There are an awful lot of fans who think that as long as something green with ping pong ball eyes hops around on screen, it constitutes Kermit the Frog. Further sentiments are expressed, essentially saying that something is better than nothing. What a sad fate for Jim Henson's most well-known alter ego. I love all the fans, but with respect, on these couple of points, you are wrong. Kermit is the spoke in the middle of the Muppet wheel, around which all things Muppet revolve, and without Kermit being fully intact, there is no future for the Muppets. No new directions, no exploitative reboots, no future.
I think this comment is really missing the big picture. I will admit that there have been moments in recent years where Kermit has not felt like Kermit to me, particularly in the early years of Matt taking on this role. But recently, I feel like Kermit has returned. I think about the commencement speech that Kermit gave at the University of Maryland. It was really good.
Sometimes it can feel like the challenges just keep coming, but look at you. I know that you're going to be okay because you're here. You did it. And I think that deserves another round of applause.
To me, that was Kermit, not because he was green with ping pong ball eyes, but because it felt like he was speaking from the heart. I saw Kermit's soul, his reality. I don't like Matt Vogel's performance because something is better than nothing, but because I can see the work that he's put into making it authentic, despite the shitty writing that he is often forced to act out. I think it is unfair to paint anyone who enjoys modern Kermit as people who are willing to accept a subpar performance. I agree that Kermit is one of the most important characters in terms of how well they all work as an ensemble, but I think Steve is ignoring how important every other character is too. One of the best Muppet projects in the last 10 years has been Muppets Mayhem, which didn't include Kermit at all. Why does it work so well? Because the puppeteers were given a lot of creative freedom to say what their characters should act like.
In the 1960s, a band called The Bugs was literally manufactured to copy the Beatles' iconic sound by recording cover versions of their music. None of these tribute acts claimed to be the actual thing. There was no attempt to make the public believe that what they were seeing and hearing was the genuine article, the actual people themselves. All lacked the depth and creative spark that brought about the respective phenomena in the first place. And so we find ourselves in a world where, when we look at the Muppets, what is before us is, essentially, a tribute band. The difference? They are claiming to be authentic, and you are expected to believe that.
He then compares the modern Muppets to a cover band who are lying and trying to convince the audience that they're the real thing, which I think is insulting to the modern Muppet team, especially people like Dave Goelz and David Rudman, who have been working with the Muppets since Jim Henson was alive. They are the original members of the band, yet they don't seem to count for the purposes of this statement. Furthermore, puppeteers like Matt Vogel and Eric Jacobson were approved by original puppeteers like Jerry Nelson and Frank Oz to take over the roles after they retired. I don't think the Bugs were hand-selected by the Beatles to sing the songs they wrote.
I first became acquainted with Kermit the Frog in the mid-1960s, as he originally began to appear as a character. He was no longer the anonymous abstract thing Jim Henson created, but had become a frog, who was developing a distinct individual persona supplied in an ongoing way from a single individual performer. That individuality was the basis for his achieving a connection with you, the audience, as it allowed him to evolve in a consistent and anticipated fashion over more than 2 decades. The methodology of characters emanating from one specific performer applies to all of the core Muppets. I think we can all agree that the most devastating occurrence in the history of the Muppets was Jim's unexpected death in 1990. I want you all to understand that there was a second devastating and insidious turn of events that began to take hold in addition to losing Jim. The commodification of the Muppets without the wisdom and guidance of their creator. Technically, the Muppet characters began to be a commodity prior to Jim's death, since it was necessary to assign a monetary value to them to facilitate the sale of the company to Disney. Their worth had to be measured in dollar signs.
I just realized I never explained what the Disney deal is, and you kind of need to know what that is in order to understand what Steve is talking about and what I'm going to be talking about later in the video. Basics, all you need to know. In 1989, Jim Henson was planning on selling the Muppets to the Walt Disney Corporation. They were getting pretty far in negotiations, but Disney kept wanting more and more out of the deal. For example, they really wanted the rights to the Sesame Street characters, which Jim said was not on the table from the very beginning. And also just a lot of other stuff, which Steve is going to be talking about later in the video. Basically, the deal fell through when Jim Henson passed away. A lot of people speculate that the reason his health declined so quickly is partially because the Disney deal was so stressful, but like I said, that's just speculation. Yeah, the deal fell through. That's why the Muppets were not bought by Disney until 2004. Back to the video.
But there was a stipulation. Jim's intent was for the characters to continue to be performed by their original performers indefinitely. This particular methodology would preserve the individuality of each character, allowing them to continue to evolve just as they had for years prior, while maintaining their individual relationships with the fans. The rejection of this fundamental core principle within the Muppets during the negotiations of the sale was a large part of why Jim was having second thoughts about his decision to sell to Disney. The Muppets becoming a brand to be bought and sold brought about what I believe to be the most devastating thing to damage the Muppets in their history outside of Jim's death. The wholly objective corporate approach of treating the characters as roles to be portrayed by actors who audition, rather than to continue to view them as direct extensions of artistic expression from specific individual originative performers. The non-creative temporal executives in charge can hire and fire at will those who would otherwise be committed for life under the guise of, it's just a role played by a hired hand.
Steve then describes how, in the early years of the Muppets, Jim emphasized the importance of having one puppeteer originate and perform a character in order to keep them feeling like individuals with souls that could connect to the audience. This is absolutely true. The Muppets would not have connected with so many people if they had not felt like individuals. It is absolutely one of the things that Jim fought for during the Disney deal, and I believe that Disney has and continues to misunderstand why that is so important to keeping the reality of these characters. That is why I continue to wish that Steve had not been fired, because I know how much he put into his characters. But I think the point he is making here about how these characters should not simply be roles that are auditioned for ignores one really important aspect of casting puppeteers. Sometimes people die. Sometimes people retire. These roles are not recast out of malice, but out of necessity. This happened even before Jim passed away.
Someone taking on a role that was previously performed by somebody isn't really a new thing. It happened a lot over the years, like a lot. So the instances that I can think of, so Brian Meal left Sesame Street, and so Marty took on Telly, and Pam, our CRO, took on Grungetta. Richard Hunt, I think with the story was he was frustrated with playing that little red monster, so he threw it at Kevin Clash, and that became Elmo. Jerry Nelson grew weary or was hurt by playing Snuffy, not hurt emotionally, but physically. And so Marty auditioned, and he now plays Snuffy. And Richard again, wasn't Richard the original Miss Piggy?
Recasting isn't new. Jim wanted the Muppets to thrive long after he had passed, so recasting needs to happen in instances of death and retirement. Once again, I do not think Steve should have been fired, but that situation is the outlier. If a character is recast, it is not simply because Disney wanted to change things up. The Muppet performers take their roles incredibly seriously, and absolutely do everything in their power to respect the puppeteers that came before them, and consider their perspective and life experience in absolutely everything they do.
You know, Richard's always on my mind. Every time I put my hand on the puppet, I think of him.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the way he moved her, and he, you know, especially when she played the guitar, when he always had her head back, you know, and
right.
You know, and her neck, her long neck, and her head's bent, her hair's going. So, you know, I try to definitely bring some of that to Janice, that, you know, some of the technical puppeteering that Richard did.
Once it became the standard for ongoing established characters who are well known by the fans to be recast in cattle call editions, the true subjective art of the Muppets began to disappear for all time. Now, many of the top-tier Muppets are based upon a list of cliché traits observed in YouTube videos. They lack the depth of character upon which they were originated, and even worse, what we recognize is replaced by new interpretations. They still do the same old stories using the same old jokes and side gags, but with no legitimate evolution. That's because there are no new ideas for them, only surface observations made by owners, producers, and performers that view them objectively from the outside rather than from the core of the characters' subjective hearts and minds, with any direct access to the original sources having been eliminated.
I will agree that in recent years, many of the Muppet characters have been dumbed down and are often unable to evolve. But that is not the fault of the puppeteers.
Well, it's never ours, right? When we take over somebody's characters,
exactly.
never ours anyway, but we grow into it.
Yeah, right. And you have to, you know, keep, you know, a little bit of the original character, because that's like in the DNA of the character, but then you have to bring something new to it, or else it's just not authentic.
Yeah, it doesn't grow, and they can't grow. It's like we maintain the integrity of who they are and what the originators created, and then hopefully we can add a little bit in there along the way until
they have to stay relevant. In order to stay relevant, they have to be able to evolve and change.
I must reiterate that the most recent Muppets project, Muppets Mayhem, was highly praised for actually developing and evolving its characters. That was because of the modern Muppeteers, not in spite of them. Puppeteer Bill Beretta was a co-writer for that show and was able to include so much input from the other puppeteers as to how their characters should act.
There's what people know based on what they've seen, right? But there's all kinds of things that when we're performing, there's things we're doing, with each other that don't make it to the screen. And we have our own ideas of backstories and things. And so it was fun to throw those out there and get the Muppet performers to make some suggestions about character and throw them into the pot so we could discuss them in the writer's Zoom, and see what would bubble up. And then, or take an idea that Jeff or Adam or one of the other writers would come up with. And I would kind of, occasionally go to the guys and one of the guys and say, hey, what do you think about, Janice having a twin sister, And Dave would be like, that's pretty cool. What is she like? And we didn't know yet, but we would then start to, talk about it and find ways of developing the characters more. So that was the fun part. We, as the performers, I think, had an idea of who these characters are, obviously, by learning from the originators and things that we play around with for years. But this gave us even more of a chance to get deeper and find more stuff with them.
And I know that Steve's statement is mostly focusing on the Muppets franchise, but for what it's worth, Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock is a show that also has been heavily praised for feeling authentic and fresh. That was because puppeteers were put into executive producer roles and given creative freedom to evolve their characters. And in both of those shows, the majority of the puppeteers were hired after Jim Henson passed away. So maybe, we shouldn't blame the puppeteers who never met Jim Henson for the Muppets feeling stale.
Enter a big shiny reboot of The Muppet Show. Just around the bend, an idea I pitched multiple times from 2010 forward only to see it entirely ignored. But I had very specific reasons for proposing bringing back the series at that juncture. My reasons for placing the Muppets in their original surroundings was to give a new ensemble of Muppet performers a familiar place to hone their historical knowledge of the characters they had been gifted while they had access to the people who were there in the days of origin, and at a point with Kermit 20 years intact. But make no mistake, this is a Hail Mary right out of the Disney playbook used when nothing else is working. Garner attention from the press by bringing in a recognizable Hollywood name to produce, and place the characters in a setting so familiar that their lack of depth and traditional logic is more likely to go unnoticed. Think The Muppets in 2011. You will see this tactic of using the star name again and again, although I do believe that Seth Rogen is likely a good choice to be a showrunner for a Muppet project if only he had access to characters still operating with a basis in Jim's influence. I have also been told that the hope of top performers is that after 10 years, this new Muppet Show reboot can be used by them to prove that by marketing them in front of the red curtains, you will believe that they are providing faithful versions of the characters. The expectation is that you, the viewers, have forgotten Jim and his influence. And maybe you have. But there categorically cannot be a faithful continuation of something as unique and established as The Muppet Show without Kermit fully intact at the top of the pyramid. And even then, servicing the other core characters is an uphill climb. So at this point, I urge those of you who are savvy enough to see beyond the hype to gain the deepest possible understanding of all that Jim brought to the uniqueness of his characters that will be ignored for all time. I don't hate Disney executives, or the Hensons, or Matt. And this new/old conceit might make you laugh, but let's be clear that this is the product of treating the Muppets as what they are rather than as who they are. And it leaves us all with a result that doesn't faithfully approach the magic and integrity of the original.
Steve says that he pitched this idea for a Muppet reboot many times over the years, something I do not doubt because I think basically everyone has been begging for a reboot of the classic Muppet Show since Muppets Tonight. Steve interprets Disney finally agreeing to this idea as a last-ditch Hail Mary to make the audience care about the modern Muppets, which is probably true. But at least it seems like Disney is finally listening to the input of the puppeteers after years of ignoring their ideas. Is it scummy that they didn't start listening to them until recently? Absolutely, but at least it's a step in the right direction. I will say that I am absolutely worried about this new Muppet Show. I do think that the Muppets could end up feeling stale and bland in this familiar setting, but if that were the case, I would not blame it on the puppeteers. I think it's unfair of Steve to attack this project that he has never seen and declare that anyone who may watch it and enjoy it is not savvy enough to see the difference between the classic and modern Muppets. The truth is, no one has seen this project. It might be horrible, but also it might be great. One of the things it will never be is the original Muppet Show. By making an audience go in with that high of a bar, expecting the same joy that they experienced watching a show that aired 50 years ago, you are setting them up for disappointment. The truth is, it won't be the same, because the creative minds behind the original, people like Jim Henson, or Jerry Jewell, the head writer, or David Laser, the executive producer, and many, many more people, simply are no longer here. Furthermore, the original Muppet Show aired when television and show business were completely different. The show will have a different style, a different sense of humor, and different cultural references, simply because it is not the 70s anymore. These differences are not inherently bad, it just means that they're different. It won't mean that the show will not have the same uniqueness and depth of the original. Also, of course they're going to advertise the guest stars who are behind this project. The Muppets have always utilized guest stars. That was the point of the original Muppet Show, to see a beloved celebrity put into wacky situations you wouldn't normally see them in. Acting like they're hamming up the inclusion of these stars as an insidious marketing tactic is kind of ridiculous. Finally, by putting all of the things that could go wrong with this Muppet Show on the shoulders of Kermit's performance, Steve is turning himself into the ultimate victim, the one person who could have saved the Muppets if only he had been given the chance. I will absolutely agree that the Muppets in recent years have sometimes felt corporate and soulless, devoid of the life they once had. But that is because the Muppets are no longer owned by a company that was founded and run by one person with a singular creative vision. They are now owned by a megacorporation that cares more about making money than creating art. This is kind of embarrassing, but I remember actually crying while watching a TikTok of Miss Piggy recapping one of the Star Wars movies, because it felt like Disney was turning these two beloved franchises that used to have real creativity into corporate nostalgia bait, something to trick fans into spending more money on their Disney Plus subscription.
From the beginning, this movie is just chock full of Disney legends. You got Carrie Fisher, Disney legend, arguing with Harrison Ford, another Disney legend. It'd be nice to add future Disney legend Miss Piggy to this franchise.
I don't blame how bad that TikTok was on the puppeteer Eric Jacobson. I know he didn't write the script for it, but it did make me mourn the good old days where the Muppets felt authentic. Disney as a corporation has made the Muppets lose some of that authenticity. If Steve worded this entire statement as more of a critique of the Disney Corporation and the way that the Muppets are written, I would agree with him 100%. Instead, though, he seems to put most of the blame for the Muppets' downfall on his former co-workers and their performances, and I think that that is unfair.
I want you all to know that from day one, throughout nearly 3 decades, not once did I ever have the notion to make Kermit my own. On the contrary, it was absolutely vital in my process to make certain that any egotistical notion of marking territory never happened so that Kermit remained based solely upon Jim's foundational original. There is no other way for what I consider to be a living, breathing persona to stay consistently convincing as it evolves. This differs entirely from the present-day recasting process. I think what bothers me the most is the presumption that altering the qualities that you, as fans, have connected with for decades is somehow acceptable and desirable when a new performer is incapable of stepping into the role in an evolutionary fashion. It is as though producers and performers who never sat in the same place as we did with Jim are somehow qualified to redefine what Jim and the rest originated. It's nothing less than sheer hubristic arrogance. Trust me, what was conceived and put forth in the late 1970s was not only good enough to remain the basis to allow the Neo-Muppets to have jobs today, it was the biggest phenomena on the planet. At its core, none of it is in need of reimagining.
Steve talks about how, in his time performing Kermit, he never tried to make the character his own or change the core of who Kermit was. But I personally think that he just isn't seeing the full picture. The truth is, Steve did change Kermit. When Steve performed him, Kermit lacked some of the sarcasm and temper that Jim put into the character. I'm not trying to say that these changes Steve made to Kermit were good or bad. In fact, it's clear they were completely unintentional on Steve's part. But I do think that it's not fair for him to claim that the modern puppeteers are maliciously changing the heart and soul of these beloved characters, when he also changed them. I agree that many of the changes that have been made to the characters in recent years are not good ones. But I think the greatest victim of these changes is not Kermit, but Miss Piggy, who has been modernized to hell and back to her own detriment. Honestly, though, I like some of the changes the Muppets have made to certain characters in recent years. I like that Animal has stopped attacking women and has become a bit sweeter. I like that Uncle Deadly has turned into sort of this flamboyant gay icon. I like how much more obsessed with crystals and spirituality Janice is. I like these changes. That doesn't mean I still don't adore the old show in which certain characters would act more like they used to, but I think that things can change without betraying the integrity of Jim Henson's legacy. Okay, originally this wasn't in my script, but I sort of found an example of Steve changing Kermit and kind of making it his own, so I just want to tell you guys about it. There's an episode of the 2015 Muppet Show called Little Green Lie, and the plot of it is basically that Kermit and Miss Piggy are lying to Kermit's nephew Robin and saying that they're still in a relationship even though they broke up like a year ago at this point, just because they want to spare his feelings. They don't want to make him feel bad. So, Steve really didn't like this episode, and he made a little statement as to why he didn't like this episode, and here's his quote. "I don't think that Kermit would lie to him. I think that as Robin came to Kermit, he would say, 'Things happen, people go their separate ways, but that doesn't mean we don't care about you.' Kermit is too compassionate to lie to him to spare his feelings." So, like, this is so not who Kermit is. Like, I'm gonna put together, like, a series of clips of Kermit lying to people, sometimes not even for a good reason, because on the original Sesame Street show, on the original Muppet Show, Kermit would lie to people all the time, just for fun, just because he felt like it, or because he didn't want to get smacked by Miss Piggy. Like, it's truly, the fact that Steve thinks that Kermit is like this upstanding Mickey Mouse type guy who would never lie, is like, Steve, I thought you knew Kermit more than anyone. I thought you understood him on like a deep personal level. What do you mean? I love you, Steve. I do, genuinely. You're like so amazing. But like you were so wrong in this one situation. It's just like insanely wrong. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the scripts now.
All right, Kermit, my client won't work unless you give him twice as much money.
This is my final offer. 10 times as much as he's making now.
You got a deal.
Good. Oh, Irv! Irv!
Hey, congratulations, kid. You're making 10 times as much money.
Yeah, and I used to make nothing.
Right.
Ah.
And 10 times nothing is
nothing.
Yeah, right. And don't forget, I get 10% of that.
My Kermit is not wanting me to overshadow Lena Horne.
Oh, no. He got your number so you wouldn't look ludicrous.
What?
What's a puppet?
Oh, well, see...
It's a doll.
Yeah,
it's made to look
it's a doll.
alive by wiggling strings,
Yeah, strings.
or putting your hand inside
hands,
of it.
like that.
What a stupid idea. Who wants to watch dolls wiggle?
Well,
I mean, even I wouldn't do an act like that. Doll wiggling, talk about boring. I didn't have the heart to tell him.
I'm going to record the loudness level on your show. You see, there have been some complaints about the noise.
It's the music, so, huh?
Yes. You see, your strings are okay, but the brass, especially the trumpet, is murder.
Oh, terrific. Kermit, hey, it's time to introduce Dizzy Gillespie.
Who?
Izzy Gillespie, one of the world's greatest violinists.
Izzy? What are you talking about, violinist? You know Dizzy plays... Oh, why did you do that?
Kermit, you wanted to see me?
Oh, yes, Miss Piggy. You know, I couldn't help but overhear that conversation between you and Scooter about that offer you got from the other show.
Oh, Kermit, I am so sorry. I didn't want you to hear that. Oh, that terrible boy.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm kind of glad that I did, because I have come to a decision that I think will make you very happy.
Oh?
I've decided to let you go.
You have what?
Well, you see, Piggy, I don't want to stand in your way.
Kermit!
Good luck, kid. Does this mean you want your job back? Oh, good. Incidentally, though, You will have to take a pay cut. Well, sure. I mean, if you could afford to pay off the audience and buy all those flowers and the fur and the mail and all that stuff, then I think you could. But if you don't go on, I'll have to. And I can't dance my way out of warm jello.
No problem. I used to be a dance teacher.
What? Wait a minute. Are you offering to give me a dance lesson?
Of course. In a few minutes, I can have your toes tapping, or, in your case, your flippers flapping.
That's terrific. Hey, tell me, Gene. Tell me, where would you like to give me this dance lesson?
Oh, I don't care anywhere at all.
Well, how about right over here?
Right. Now, Kermit, the first thing you got to remember is to stay relaxed. Kermit, you tricked me.
The word channeling gets thrown around a lot these days. I often see the term used to indicate that someone is somehow receiving some sort of divine inspiration from someone else who has moved on or died, an originator of something whose torch is now represented by them. I take the word channeling very seriously, and I am very aware that when I was tasked with carrying on Kermit, my first and biggest challenge was to fully inhabit him in the exact same way that Jim did to the best of my ability. To whatever extent I was able to preserve the core of Kermit, that ability did indeed rely upon so-called channeling of all that I knew from within an interpersonal relationship with Jim. Without having had that direct relationship, no amount of calling my objective opinions channeling would have netted anything of integrity where Kermit is concerned. To put it simply, I can attest that it is simply not possible to inhabit a character as well known and recognizable as Kermit just because you might be the most dedicated of fans and have watched countless old videos of what the originator did prior. With a definitive soul like Kermit, you know him when you're with him, just as you know a parent, your spouse, or a close friend. And having looked him in the eyes for decades, so do I. A very important part of my process was to try and falsify any notion that came into my mind about Jim in the tradition of Karl Popper before applying it to Kermit. That simply means that I made no assumptions about what Jim did or who Jim was. I put any educated hunches through vigorous examination to find examples and data to either confirm the idea or rule it out. If one is to actually achieve an internal realization of another person's psyche, this is an extremely vital endeavor using actual data based on direct knowledge of that originator as a sort of checks and balances methodology. Otherwise, self-policing one's own opinions will not magically make an opinion truth.
Steve claims that it is impossible for a puppeteer to channel a character without having known the person who originated that role, especially for a role as iconic as Kermit. I think this claim is doing a disservice to the many puppeteers who have done an incredible job channeling these characters despite never meeting the people who created them. Bill Beretta never met Jim, yet his performances of Dr. Teeth, of Rolf the dog, and of the Swedish Chef are just incredible. Peter Linz also never met Jim Henson, yet his Ernie feels just as lovable and sweet. Dan Garza and John Tartaglia never met Richard Hunt, yet their performances as Junior Gorg and Gunge, respectively, make me feel like a part of Richard is still alive. And, to perhaps use a controversial example, I think Jordan Lockhart perfectly embodies Wembley Fraggle, despite getting no real input from Steve before taking on that role. The truth is, being a great Muppet puppeteer is not about directly meeting Jim Henson or Richard Hunt or whatever. It's about meeting the people who did know them, listening to those stories, studying the person's work, understanding the ways that those characters have touched the lives of their audience. Jim Henson's legacy is not about knowing Jim Henson personally, but about knowing why people care about him in the first place. Matt Vogel has never spoken for Jim or claimed to understand Kermit better than Jim did. He has been put into an impossible position to bring this character to life and is doing the best he can with the tools he has, just like Steve did when he performed Kermit. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a Muppet puppeteer, so my opinion doesn't count for as much in that regard. But I believe Steve is unintentionally not treating his former coworkers or fans who still have hope for this franchise with respect.
Treating the Muppets as roles is inaccurate because unlike ordinary fictional characters who live entirely in their own screen world, the Muppets are both the characters and the actors within their films. As actors, they maintain a functioning existence in our own real world just as any other actor does, often appearing as themselves both live and in television interviews. Kermit is a tangible present-day individual in this world, a fully realized persona with a personal lifelong history no different than that of anyone you know in your day-to-day life. You are seeing the effect of all that having disintegrated. Who he is established and cannot be subject to debates over one version versus another version, any more than who you are can be. It's either Kermit or it isn't. At a point when the audience is debating versions of Kermit, there is no longer Kermit to debate. So you say you have trouble with the voice? Let me tell you, what is missing is a far greater loss than a voice. Virtually everything of Jim that he put into Kermit, all things that I made sure were kept alive at the core of Kermit, gone. Gone for good. But perhaps the most devastating loss of all is that there is no longer a linear basis for us to ever find out the truth of what Kermit would and should be doing next. Without Kermit continuing to be the vessel of Jim's influence, we have lost Jim for all time. Just as without Jim's influence continuing within Kermit, he is lost as well. And while you're rolling that thought over in your mind, take time to remember the list of those people claiming to protect Jim's legacy, who put this plan into action, and who supported it, both wholeheartedly and tacitly.
I keep going back to this thing that Steve said towards the very beginning of this statement, that certain fans think that anything that's green with ping pong balls for eyes is Kermit. To tell you the truth, it is very difficult for me to not fully believe in the magic of Kermit when I see him in front of me. I do believe that Kermit is a fully realized person, even now. That's a real frog in my eyes. Because even though Jim Henson died years before I was born, I see his legacy in everything. I, of course, always grew up with Jim Henson and the Muppets, but when I first started to truly fall in love with them, it was after one of the worst depressive episodes of my life. A period where all I saw around me was darkness. The art that Jim Henson created in his lifetime made me feel like life could be beautiful and worth living for the first time since I was a child. More than anything, I want other people to see that legacy, to understand the beauty and creativity that Jim made possible, even decades after he left us. I know that Steve wants that too, but I wish he would give the creative minds behind this new Muppet Show the chance to prove that they can show us that legacy. A question I continuously wondered while reading this statement is, what does Steve want? What does he want to accomplish with this statement? At this point, all he's really doing is discouraging Muppet fans from giving this new show a chance. The truth is, the Muppets need a consistent, weekly show where their performers are given the opportunity to evolve their characters and make them feel dynamic and real. They need this familiar setting where they can connect back to their roots of their characters and understand Jim's legacy fully. If people do not watch this special, that consistent show will never happen, and Disney will get the message that people do not care about the Muppets or Jim Henson. By discouraging people from watching, he is taking steps to make the problems he discussed worse, not better. I think Steve has every right to feel bitter towards the modern Muppets. He was treated poorly, and I think that his anger and his sadness are justified. But this statement just feels like such a slap in the face to everyone who is working to make the Muppets better. Dave Goelz, the puppeteer of Gonzo and Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and many, many more Muppets, has been working for the Jim Henson Company for over 50 years. He joined the Muppets in 1973, 5 years before Steve did. He is constantly singing the praises of the modern Muppets and giving constructive criticism to the puppeteers and advice based on his years of working with Jim.
I say this to you guys, I think of you as the new guys who are doing Muppet characters now, that every job seems to me like a reunion. I literally, I hate to say it to you, Matt, but I love working with you. And it's just not part of our normal discourse.
No, it's not, no.
But I love it.
David Rudman started working with the Muppets in 1981, and also knew Jim for many years. He has his own production company and is constantly trying to create a work environment for his employees, just like the one Jim created.
Put it all together, and I try to really run the studio like Jim ran the Muppets back in the day. And what I observed from that was, it was just very collaborative. Everybody, we've talked about this before, like the early days where it was best idea wins, like Dave Goelz always says, you're, in service of the best idea. Mm-hmm. There was no egos. It was just kind of like open, whoever had something. And we really try to run, our spiffy shows like that. And Jack was like that. And, our new show is like that, Don Quixote. And, yeah.
Jim Henson's children all continue to work with the Muppets in some capacity and spread his message of love and kindness through the work they do. Yet Steve acts like the Muppets lost all connection to their creator the minute he was fired. They didn't. I think that sometimes, as Muppet fans, our love of nostalgia blinds us to reality. I think that for so many people, the love of Steve Whitmire and the disappointment at his firing has led them to treat anything made without him as subpar and his opinion on the Muppets as gospel. The truth is, you can miss Steve without hating the modern Muppets. You can love and respect Steve while also critiquing the things he says. If I haven't made it abundantly clear by saying it over and over again, even if I disagree with Steve Whitmire, I still adore him and the work that he has done with the Muppets. He is very important to me, and I would hope that he understands where I'm coming from. I encourage everyone to watch the new Muppet Show if they can. Whether it is good or if it is bad, I think it is worth giving it a chance. However, if you don't want to watch the new Muppet Show, that's also fine, but don't have your reason for not watching it be that you don't like the fact that Kermit sounds different. There are a lot more valid reasons why you might not want to watch a show being created by an evil corporation that doesn't care about creativity and uses AI slop and nostalgia bait to trick you into giving them more money. I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure that they're there. Oh my god, okay, I just finished this video. This is so exciting. Thank you so much for watching until the end. It just absolutely means the world to me. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking it and sharing it with a friend. Please comment if you have any advice. Let me know what you thought about it. I'm obviously very new to making YouTube videos, so any comments, concerns, anything would be so appreciated. Steve Whitmire, I know you're definitely not watching this, but if somehow you have found this video, I really hope that you are not offended. You truly are a hero of mine, and I genuinely agree with a lot of what you said in this statement. This was obviously all meant in good faith, so I hope you know that. I would like to give a huge shout out to Pirate Glitch, who read out all of Steve Whitmire's quotes for me. He is an amazing voice actor. There will be a link in the description to all of his socials if you want to check out his work. We actually met because we're both working on a fan-made Gravity Falls episode called Race Against Slime, so if you like Gravity Falls and you want to see some characters I helped design or hear Pirate Glitch voice Google Stan, definitely keep an eye out for that in the future. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I have a few more video essays that I'm working on, so if you like hearing me talk, if you want to watch more videos about TV shows and movies, please consider subscribing. I would absolutely love you forever if you did. And finally, remember to keep believing, keep pretending, and have a great rest of your day. Bye!